Cowboys training camp starting this week. Our guy Zach Hedrick, Jack Green out there for us. You can catch all their reports at 9 o'clock on Fox SA and 5, 6, and 10 every day on News 4.
And if you're in Austin, at 6 and 10 on CBS Austin.
Yeah. They have so many storylines going in, but for me, I think it rhymes with BB Bam is their biggest storyline. They have a 6'2", 200-foot cloud hanging over this training camp, and he's not going to be there. CeeDee Lamb is probably not going to show up to training camp until he gets a new deal, and I don't blame him one bit for that. What does that say about, one, the roster status, the contract status, and two, does it hurt them that he's not going to be there to start?
Nah. I mean, training camp's training camp. Guys always acclimate pretty quickly when they do get in. And again, I don't see Jerry Jones from all the talk budging, with this whole thing, with this whole new philosophy of we're just going to roll the dice, which means they're both going to be signed by the second week of camp.
I mean, we don't know what's going to happen. There's a lot that can happen between now and Thursday, first off. But I thought it was interesting this week, though, like there have been some revelations. Zach Martin saying last year when he held out and missed a bunch of days, padded practices, that he felt like that actually did hurt him and his performance during the course of the year. So I think there is benefit for CeeDee Lamb to be there. And I think another thing that I thought was interesting this week was the revelation that CeeDee's contract status is above everybody else's at this point. I thought that was a given, right? I mean, he's earned the right to get paid like a grade A player, and he's not going to go to camp with 1 year left on his contract. This is standard operating procedure. He's been patient, waiting to get his bag. It's time for him to get his bag, and then everybody can wait after CeeDee Lamb, as far as I'm concerned.
Well, a couple of things with that. Dak's going to be there. His contract.
He's under contract.
He's under contract. So CeeDee, but Dak's going to be there because he knows he has all the leverage. It doesn't really matter if he gets hurt or not. Plus, he's already said he's going to be there. So CeeDee's obviously going to take a back seat because he's not there. So his contract is going to go first anyway.
Wait. Why, as far as the injury thing, why are they different?
Because Dak has all the leverage no matter what.
Leverage doesn't get you insurance.
He's going to get paid regardless. If he tears his ACL in training camp, he'll still get paid. CeeDee's different. He'll get paid by the Cowboys. They'll take care of him no matter what.
Dak?
Yes, because even if he gets hurt, they still have a $40 million dead cap next year. He has them bent over a barrel no matter what.
Okay.
He does. You're right. But at some point, you have to do what Charles Haley said, which is it's time to pay the price for all of these decisions that you've made contractually with Dak. And it will be fascinating to see because there are a million reasons for them to be incentivized to extend Dak, right? Specifically what you said about the dead cap money. However, at some point, you have to move on and realize that you're going to have to flip the script on some of this stuff. Right? And look at how quickly they turn things around. Yeah. But look how quickly now they are back in the same kind of situation the Cowboys are in. Jordan Love says he's not coming to camp without a new deal. This is how the game is played.
Chuck, to your point, though, about Jerry and how these contracts usually work. When it was you and I on the podcast last year, when Zach Martin was holding out, and we were all like, oh, what's going to happen? Is he going to hold out into the season? We've seen it before. Emmitt Smith was paid. Zach Martin was paid.
Miles Austin was paid.
Yes,
you can go right
down the list of every single person that Jerry has caved on. And he's going to cave on CeeDee Lamb as well, whether it's the first week of training camp, whether it's the third week of training camp.
But does he cave on both?
Right. So that's fair.
He's going to give Dak and CeeDee both a contract.
I think to Don's point, like CeeDee has earned the right to get paid like the rest of those guys at this point. Dak has already been paid like that. So the question becomes, will Jerry give him another huge bag like that? I don't know. I really don't know at this point.
I don't know either.
With CeeDee not being there, though, it opens up a lot of opportunity. One of the huge questions coming into this training camp is who the hell else do they have on the offense? You have Brandon Cooks, you have CeeDee Lamb, question mark. So what opportunity in training camp does this now give to a Jaylen Tolbert, a Kevontae Turpin, any of those guys?
There's a third guy, Proctor. Is it who's the guy that starts with a P?
Chuck, what does the opportunity look like with CeeDee Lamb sitting out, giving those opportunities to the younger guys now to find out who that 3 receiver is, because Michael Gallup's not there anymore, taking up time.
Right. Well, that's because Jalen Tolbert made a huge leap between year 1 and year 2. That's why Gallup isn't there any longer. And, again, I know I was really hard on Kevontae Turpin, especially early. It's like there's no doubting his athleticism. And he, too, has made incremental leaps, and you can tell that they like him. I'm not saying he's going to be a number 3 or 4 receiver, but he's a nice plan D or E if things were to go really wonky here. But, again, you're going to have Jalen Tolbert really take a step up. I think at this point, Brandon Cooks is who he is. He's a solid NFL receiver. But even with all of the stuff going on with CeeDee, we're not even talking about the running back room and how that potentially might look. There are so many question marks on this Cowboys offense that it's almost going to have to be, they're going to have to do it differently than they may have done it last year. Maybe a lot differently than they did it last year. And then B, they're really going to need the defense to be like at an elite level. Even, they were a top 5 defense last year. They're going to have to be even better this year.
You mentioned the running backs. That was another question I had for you. The running back situation is just a cluster bleep. You don't know who's going to be the number 1 back. Are you really going to have Zeke Elliott be the number 1 back as you go into the year?
I think it'll be committee. It's
going to be committee, but he's going to be the starter probably. And then you're going to have like a 40-40-20 split, almost like it kind of reminds me of the 2007 Giants when they had Ahmad Bradshaw and Brandon Jacobs, and then the third guy that I can never remember his name of, kind of like the thunder and lightning and rain kind of thing. Is that going to work?
Sounds like a song.
Is that going to work though in this day?
Again, I think that's why training camp is going to be so important, right? Because we're not even talking about the fact that they also have 2 rookie offensive linemen. One is learning a new position at center. So you had Beebe and Guyton in this mix, and it kind of reminds me of where the Texans were last year at this time, which was there are too many question marks that you could see going the other way for the Texans to succeed, but yet the Texans answered every single question mark and then overcame all those injuries to do what they did. So, again, we'll just be keeping an eye on it and see how things develop. But this feels a lot like the Texans did last year at this time.
Did you find who you were looking for?
Yeah, I think it was the Crooms. Crooms.
All right.
Corey
now that we've moved on from receivers.
Yes.
But I'm fascinated because the Cowboys have a receiver on their roster named Cam Johnson.
That's who we should have talked about earlier.
Right. Well,
That's who Kelvin's
they can't
getting
fit him under the cap either. Yeah.
Talking about the other major storyline to me, Chuck and Don, and I think that we talked about this a lot when we were going through OTAs and stuff, is the young guys. DeMarvion Overshown,
Yep.
Oso Odigizua, Mozzie Smith, Sam Williams, Tyler Smith, Tyler Guyton, Cooper Beebe. You have so many guys, so many people trying to fill in holes of veterans that have left now. The only way that the Cowboys win 12 games, the only way that they make the playoffs is if half to 3/4 of these young guys make a leap.
That's fair.
And I just don't know if you can rely on so many young, inexperienced players coming from sitting in a city right now that just saw the Spurs rely on so many young players, inexperienced players, and go 22-60. I just don't know if that's possible.
I think this is a little different in that I think, I hate to keep reverting back to the Packers, but how quickly they flipped it. That was the youngest team the NFL had seen in 6 years, and they're going to be even younger this year. So, how much wisdom is there is having a bunch of guys with bloated contracts and, all you have to do is look at the Packers and see a bunch of no-names and, you've been really crafty with how you've drafted and you got a lot of guys to step up and you got a lot of guys to step up fast. The first 8 weeks of the season, nobody's talking about the Packers making any kind of playoff run. that looked like the worst team in football, the way they were running their offense. And then they flipped it. And then the next thing you know, they got hot. So, I think that's part of the reason why the Cowboys pivoted because they got all that shoved in their face in that playoff game. These punk little kids came into our place and whipped our you-know-whats, and, look how they're doing business. They don't have an overbloated contract here, there, anywhere, or all these guys that, quote-unquote, have skins on the wall. And so now the pressure's on McCarthy on a 1-year deal to do it and prove it. Same thing with Dak. Do it or prove it. Or we're going to do changes and flip this thing. because the Packers have shown you can do it in a relatively short period of time.
I've been saying it for 2 years too. Baker Mayfield going to Tampa, you don't have to have a $40 million quarterback. You don't have to have I mean, he's won 60, so
he's going to make 60 no matter where he goes. He's going to probably make 50.
That's insane.
To 60.
It's just insane.
Last thing about Cowboys training camp, the other question I have is there's no Stephon Gilmore, and he was one of the big pickups last year. They still might sign him in free agency. You don't know if he's going to be there or not once they see and evaluate the talent that they do have. But now you might have a full year of Trayvon Diggs across from Deron Bland.
Yeah.
How does that help this defense that relies so heavily on turnover margin and on forcing mistakes, on Micah and DeMarcus Lawrence getting after the quarterback and relying on those guys on the back end to pick it off? Is that going to be a benefit for these guys? And how does that DB room kind of shape up is another question that I have when you're losing that veteran presence of Stephon Gilmore.
I don't know if it matters that much if you can't stop the run. And that's their biggest issue is getting Micah to see himself as more than pass rushing sack king. If Michael would play in the middle and tackle, and I mean, just look at the Packers game. They just mashed them, and the Cowboys have to get tougher in the middle, and they have to stop the run. They've got some really talented corners. I like both those guys a lot, but I don't know if talking about the Cowboys defense. To me, it all starts and stops with can they give up less than 3 yards on a carry?
Yeah.
And I think their DB room is pretty good shape. I mean, their safeties are probably a little undersized compared to where you would like them, in terms of physical stature on the back end. But, let's not forget the re-emergence of Jordan Lewis. I mean, that's one of my favorite stories. I mean, that guy had a Liz Frank injury that by some people's accounts was the worst they'd ever seen. That basically is your foot broken in half, right? Where your toe between your toes and where your ankle is.
Doesn't sound fun.
No. And then so for him to bounce back like he did, especially late in the year, that's why Gilmore's not there. And then I think they've got some other guys too that are long and athletic DBs that are going to, they're fortunate to be deep at that position. You can afford to have a couple of really cheap guys on the back end. And then if anything were to happen, I would suspect that Stephon Gilmore would be the first guy on speed dial and you sign him back to the team. Kind of on the invisible taxi squad.
I've always been a fan of Liz Frank, one of my favorite authors.
Anyway.
That was actually pretty good.
To your point about the...
I think Chuck dated Liz Frank once.
I don't know how to recover from that. I think we're just going to move on.
Yes.
Hey, one question from the live stream from David Wickersham. Going back to the holding out stuff. He asked what you guys think. Do you feel players should play their last year of the contract before they have a right to talk about a new contract?
Depends on where they are in the deal. If it's a rookie deal and you're going into your 5th year option, no. Because you need the bag. You want to get the bag before you play that 5th year.
Yeah, I think in football, for me, it's you have to do it this way because they're non-guaranteed contracts for the most part. But the other sports, I'm with whoever had that brilliant idea. I mean, these contracts don't mean squat. You sign them, and then, the player doesn't like them. The team doesn't like how you performed against the contract. It's all a big job.
That's what a lot of fans, I'm not saying David doesn't understand, but a lot of fans don't understand. In the NFL, you get paid per game. You get a check on Monday after you play on Sunday, and you are not guaranteed another check. Now, you get your money up front in signing bonuses. But if Stephon Castle or Wemby gets hurt in year 1 of a 4-year deal, they get all that money.
Every cent.
Every cent. If you get hurt in the NFL, see you later, and you've got what you've gotten so far.
Yeah, like if CeeDee Lamb...
Deshaun Watson.
So, we don't need to talk about your crappy quarterback. So if CeeDee Lamb, for example, came to training camp and got hurt the first day, tore his ACL. Career-ending injury. He wouldn't make another cent. Like, he would get what he's owed this year, the guaranteed money this year, and then he'd be done. So for things like that, like Dak, I think that Dak should play the last year of his deal because his situation is immensely different than CeeDee's. But in the NFL, when players hold out, it's just because they're looking out for themselves. And there's in the NFL, there's really not that big of an issue with that because of the guarantee deals and the way they're structured.
CeeDee is playing under a rookie contract, and I think most would agree he has outperformed
big time
his rookie contract.
He had 135 catches last year, 1,792 yards, and I think it was 13 touchdowns. He is the at least top 5 receiver in the NFL, and he's being paid like
a kicker.
Yeah, exactly. So, not a kicker. I mean, his 5th-year option's pretty good.
He's a guy you want on your team for more than just catching footballs too. Yep. So
the question
he's earned it.
The question is
he's the best player on their team if it's not Parsons.
Agree.
He's the first or second best player on the team.
Bob, anything else?
We're good.
All right. When we come back on Thursday, we're going to have a lot of stuff to talk about, especially Cowboys.
We're coming back on Thursday?
Sadly, yeah.
So soon?
Unfortunately. We're going to have so much stuff to talk about. It's going to be so much fun. I'm not even going to mention Cam Johnson. I can't promise that.
Which one?
The Cowboys. Yeah, I was going to say, I don't know which one I'm going to mention. I'm going to get one of them in there, though. That's all we got for today on the Sneakers and Cleats podcast. Remember to download, rate, review, subscribe, give us a 5-star rating, tell a friend, tell an enemy. We'll be back on Thursday. We have AAC Media Day tomorrow. We'll talk a little bit of UTSA. We're going to talk Cowboys and Houston Texans training camp. We'll probably steer away from Spurs here in the next couple of months because it's the quiet time. Yes. So that's all we got for you today. Everyone, see you on Thursday.
Piece of fish grease. I think we ought to add to the beginning of the show, since we're not doing the numbers game, what you're listening to